Check the mic and make sure it's
So welcome everyone to the group chat brought to you by Overma. I'm Darrell, your host, and with me is Xin Wei. And this week we're gonna be talking about how you can stay motivated. Now, this is the exam period. This is the crunch period. You guys are probably dying. I think so. Because prelims is like over, but like O level is coming, A level is coming. You know, there's like end of year exams as well. This is one of the most crucial periods for you to stay at your highest level of motivation to power through this tough time. So today we'd just like to share what are some ways you can do so. Staying motivated is not easy because it just gets really tiring after a while. And it's just not easy. And we just want to let you know that if you're tuning in, cheer up because this tough times don't last, but tough people do. Get past this tough period and you can reap the benefits of your hard work. But let's talk about some actual ways and some tips that you guys can consider if you are struggling to stay motivated when it comes to your academics. Maybe Xin Wei, I can just get you to start off with how you stay motivated yourself, or whether you have any like interesting theory to share. The one that we talked about pre-pod. Yeah.
I think we did talk about. I think throughout our podcast, like there are like bits and pieces of like how to stay motivated. So maybe I would share like a quite an important component of staying motivated. I think is having a goal, right? I think we always say like, oh, what is our goal? What is our goal? Like I think for students, usually the goals are more straightforward. It will be like, oh, I want to achieve this. Like maybe I want to improve from like B3 to A1, or I want to stay within my A1 zone. Things like that, right? So I think the goals are very it's more straightforward. But I think sometimes like there is this possibility that students don't want to set a goal because they are scared that they cannot reach the goal. Then they fail themselves, right? So but setting a goal is very important in the process of like staying motivated, because if you don't have a goal, then you don't really need to stay motivated, right? Because you don't have an end point. Right. So I think setting a concrete goal is helpful I think it's important in staying motivated, but what could stop that is not setting the goal, and potentially it could be because like you don't know what goal to set, or I think I'm speaking from personal experience. I'm someone who like have very high expectation of myself. So sometimes because of that, when I am not like sometimes because of that, like when I'm setting a goal, I'm like I set the goal very vaguely, like, or like give myself a very large buffer. But sometimes because of that, like when you're working very hard towards it, you don't exactly see, like, you know, it's like a blur in front, like a blurry future. Then you also don't know like, oh, where exactly you are headed towards. And because of that, I think it becomes easier to lose sight in the process of working towards the goal when the goal is a bit more like blurrish. So I would say like one thing is really to like not achieving your goal ultimately, I think does not mean that, you know, you fail or anything. I think it is more important to be like have the courage to actually set the goal and work towards it. I feel like that distinguish like someone who will be like more successful, and someone who is like, you know, not very sure of what they want, don't want to like set that clear goal and work towards it. I think I myself is also working on this, because if you can visualize your goal in your head, like then you can like overcome that fear and like work towards it.
For me, that's a point that I completely agree with, and I'll try to pitch it in this different way. Are you try not to pursue perfection, pursue progress instead, right? Because if you just want like the perfect outcome, like I'm gonna aim for the A1, it is very difficult to start getting motivated to do it because the goal just seems so far-fetched. It just seems so difficult and in a distant place that you might never reach. But if you aim for progression, it's a lot more. You can actually see how you're gonna get there, right? You aim from this grade to this grade, then you make improvement, then you eventually reach that place. So it applies to any goals that you set in life, that you don't just want to say that, oh, I want this, like I only want this. you need to understand that you have to get to a certain point before you can reach there. So if you aim for progression, it's a lot easier to keep yourself motivated. And along the way, you can give yourself some mini victories that you can celebrate. That's how you stay on path towards that ultimate goal that you're setting. So like Xin Wei say, don't be afraid to set that goal. Just because it's far-fetched doesn't mean it's unattainable, but take it in steps. I think one step at a time is the best way to look at it. Now, for myself, one way that this is a real example as well, how I stayed motivated, especially for my A levels, was using stress in a very beneficial way. I know normally when we use the term stress, it has a very negative connotation to it, like it's bad, I don't want to be stressed. But the truth is that if you're doing anything of importance, anything that you actually care deeply enough about, you will feel stressed about it, especially if you have a desire to do well in it, right? So if you don't care about it, of course, like, no, you don't give a shit, right? Then there won't be any stress. But if you actually care about it, that it affects maybe your future and stuff, it's normal to feel stressed about it. But how you channel that stress does matter. So you want to channel the stress in a beneficial way that drives you to take actions instead of driving you down the alley of feeling depressed and burnt out. So it can go both ways. For me, I try to always think of the stress and the urgency of the situation to push me to take action. To say that, in the morning I wake up, like I don't really feel like studying. I just want to like nua, and like procrastinate, But then because I'm stressed about it, I just say, okay, I have to get this done. If not, I'll feel more worse about it. Then it's like, okay, then I'll just go and like get work done. Then when I'm studying, I don't give up because I know that I have to do it. So I try to channel that stress in a good way. It is a very fine line because it's a double-edged sword. If you lean too far one way, you can really cause yourself to collapse. But I think it's a lot to do with your mentality. I think something that I tried to do, which kind of relates to Xin Wei's point, is that I tried to let go a little on the consequences side of things. I know this sounds a bit counterintuitive on how you can use stress, but just hear me out. So one of my biggest worry taking my A levels, what if I don't do well for my A levels, right? I cannot get into the uni course that I want to. There's a lot of implications down the line. But I tried my best to remove that thought on the implications. I tell myself that it's fine, it will work out. I can go to a private U or something. I try to take away that aspect, that thing that is very negative in that sense, that is like stressing me out because of the consequences that I'm afraid of. I focus more on using that stress to turn it into positive energy to take action instead. Like on a normal day whereby I might have been watching TV, I would just use that stress and be like, okay, I need to go and do work instead. So I know this is not very easy to understand, but how I'm looking at it is like, I try to cut out the more negative thoughts and fill my brains with like more positive thoughts filled with actions and initiative and drive. That's one way that I stayed motivated in one of the more stressful period in my academic journey when I was taking my A levels. Yeah, so you look like you have something to share.
I think for my bio students, like when you're stressed, your brain will release adrenaline and like it's the fight or flight. So you cannot choose the flight. Like you must choose the fight. Like especially in this case where it isn't like a real tiger or monster chasing you. I think what the positive stressor like they were trying to say is that you need to choose the fight instead of going down the the flight spiral. In like I think what Darrell was trying to say, I totally agree with it. Basically, I think other than not focusing too much on the consequences, it's also focusing on what is within your control. I think because it's very easy to like lose motivation once you like keep focusing on something that you cannot change. Because if you realize you cannot change, then of course you are like, oh, okay, I'm done with this. But there are certain things that will be within your control. Like we just focus back to exam lah. Like how difficult the exam will be out of your control. How do you know whether or not it's gonna easy or difficult paper? How well other students are doing, also out of your control. But what you can do for these remaining 8 months is definitely within your control. It is actually like 100% within your control, right? I think that is, and if you focus on that, I think it's what Darrell say, like channel that stress into like actual action to like stay motivated to keep working towards your goal.
And I think that nicely bridges us to the next part that I like to talk about, which is the difference between what I call your intrinsic motivation versus your extrinsic motivation. Now, you really want to focus on the intrinsic stuff because those are actual thoughts and emotions that you feel that you have control over, similar to what Xingwei has mentioned, right? So, intrinsic motivation means you have a deep desire and you understand why you want to do this. Compared to an extrinsic motivation, which is maybe your parents nagging you, or like there's an external reward-ish. I mean, I guess it can be intrinsic too, but you really want to focus on yourself. Because if you can control your thoughts and emotions and you can regulate that whole cycle in a positive way, and you actually feel the intrinsic motivation, it makes a huge difference in terms of your day-to-day, how you carry out your actions and stuff. Now, it's not easy to find the intrinsic motivation because the most important question you have to be asking yourself is why. Because if you don't find your why, right, it's very difficult for you to find the motivation to keep pushing on. What I mean could be exam related is why do you want to do well for the exam? You need to understand the real implication to that because you want a brighter future. You want a choice when it comes to the course or the institutions you're going to. You want to do well just to prove to yourself that you're capable. You want to do well because you want to show that hard work pays off. There's many different reasons, or you want to do well because you want to make your parents proud. That could be an intrinsic motivation too. But if you focus too much on getting extrinsic motivation, like for example, like I can't give very good examples, but like I think one is like other people telling you to study. I think that kind of motivation wears off very fast. Or extrinsic motivation, like, oh, if I study, then I get to watch Netflix for 2 hours. That is like, to me, is considered extrinsic motivation as well because you're just using,
Definitely extrinsic.
right, you're just using external factors to try to get yourself motivated. Those are not that helpful because those don't last, and after a while it wears off. The worst is that you're using dopamine to drive your motivation, meaning, oh, I study half an hour, I can use my TikTok for 10 minutes. That is like, you're just like trying to replace that motivation with something external that is addictive. I think those are the kind of motivation that are not healthy. And I think you really want to cut down on those and focus more from coming from within. Things that you have control over, asking your why very strongly. And once you know your why, you really want to stick with it. Another way that I found intrinsic motivation, which worked for me, was looking up to a role model. I think looking up to a role model was one thing that I found very helpful because looking at the role model, I understood values on like hard work, grit, determination, and striving for excellence and stuff. Then from there, I was able to translate my admiration for my motivator into me trying to become like them, right? Like I'm striving to grow to a person like them, and I need to do the things that they are doing. So that was another form of intrinsic motivation that worked for me quite well. Uh, Especially when I was like in the phase of like following celebrities and stuff. Like, wow, it's like, wow, this celebrity is amazing, right? Like I love this celebrity. It's like, wow, but they're so hardworking and stuff. And those are just some of the good vibes that I derive off, and I try to fuel myself with it. So anyway, any thoughts on the intrinsic and extrinsic? I believe we talked about that before, right?
Yeah, I I definitely think that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with extrinsic motivation, but it cannot be like the only thing that is like moving you forward. Like I think that at some point you will feel, yeah. So you need to find your intrinsic motivation. I feel like sometimes it is not even just about, maybe motivation isn't even the right word. Sometimes it's just like doing what you need to do. Like, I don't know how to phrase that, but that doesn't really sound like a motivation. Sometimes it's almost like it's just part of the journey so that you can move on to like some other things. I may not know what that is, but I'm like excited to move on to like next part of my journey.
I think it's more like responsibility. For me, the way I look at it, like if as a student, your job and your responsibility is to study, right? Even though you might not like it,
Yeah,
you that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like I bet your parents and adults, they don't like working, but they have to work because it's their responsibility. So sometimes in life, there's a lot of time, a lot of occasions where we need to do what we might not necessarily
yeah.
enjoy, but you need to understand that that is part of society, that's part of
Mm.
life. And I think the earlier you accept that fact, the less painful it will be, right?
Maybe I accepted it as like a way for me to just move on to other points of life where maybe life can be like I will have more choices and life will be more exciting. So maybe that wasn't really a intrinsic motivation, but I just like internalized the fact and just like push myself so that I can reach that other points that I can see further and maybe enjoy other things.
And another way I see it is like if you have to do it, might as well do it well, right? Like you're already doing it, you just give it your best. And I think that's just one way to look at it. Like you'll never regret giving your best. Now, one last tip that I have for staying motivated: humans hate to be embarrassed, right? We hate being shamed and humiliated. That's part of our human nature. Use that to your advantage. So something that you can do is a public declaration, and I think that really helps. So for myself, my example is that I'm planning to run a marathon. I'm going to run a marathon in December. So I made a public declaration on IG. It's like, I'm running a marathon December. Like, it's going to happen. Now I can't back out. It's like, if I back out, people are like, hey, I thought you said running marathon.
Yeah, I heard it 3-4 times from him already. So
yeah,
like,
so it's like, that is my announcement. I tell the world I'm going to do it. And then now, like, even though when I wake up, I don't feel like going for my training, I was just like, okay, shit, I have to do
oh
this.
my god, have you been consistently training? Because it's 42 km, I'm sure you need to like have actual plan.
So I've been training like I'm still a few months away, but right now I'm building up like my consistency. So right now I'm able to run, I think, a good 6 to 8 km comfortably. Then my longest distance is like 12. Recently last weekend I just ran like 10, but it was under the sun, so I was dying. But planning to get that number closer to like 14 and 16 soon. So
Wow.
consistency is key. So that's that. But yes, public declaration really helps. So you can ask people to shame you if you don't do it. That will be even better. If you have a supportive group of friends, okay, that won't hesitate to shame you and call you out for not doing what you said you would do, that is another very helpful way to stay motivated. So I mean, motivation is very different for everyone. You get a kick out of something differently. So you need to look internally and understand why you're doing it and find ways to keep yourself motivated. It is not going to be easy because there will be down days where you just feel like giving up. And that is normal. You need to acknowledge that. But it's those days that you cannot give up. And the most powerful thing for the human mind, right, is consistent progression. So if you give up and you break that cycle, that habit that you have built, right, everything is gone. If you want to do something and you are like committed to it, you have to do it consistently. Meaning every single day you commit to it and you do not ever give yourself an excuse to back up. All right, there's reasons and there are excuses. Reasons are legit reasons, like you cannot because you really cannot. And then sometimes there's a lot more excuses that we give ourselves. So if you take ownership of your decisions and your choices you make in life and you commit to doing something, you realize that staying motivated now becomes more of a recurring pattern rather than a difficult choice that you have to make every day. So just keep and stay committed to the choice. That's the best way for you to stay motivated. And honestly, when you finally get that sweet, sweet reward after all of your hard work paid off, you will look back and you will realize that, hey, I grew as a human, and it's because of all the work and the choices that I've deliberately made that get me to this point. There will be nobody that tells you they regret putting in the hard work to get to where they want. All right. It's just that getting to that point is usually rather intimidating, right? Rather scary and a lofty goal. But staying motivated is something that is intrinsic that you can build. And it will go beyond your schooling days because these are real lessons and, growth that you can have. That is really important when you go out into the workforce or as you deal with different situations in life. So any last thoughts before we end off this podcast?
I would say be brave, live well. So like just really I think this really goes on beyond study lah. Like I think life can be very exciting. I mean there are down points, but mostly largely, it's going up.
So I think with that we come to the end of today's podcast. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Bye people.
Bye.
It sound right, boy.